The Big 12, BYU just broke a bowl record for viewership. And I was told the more people that watch you, the better chance you get to make the playoff, because that's all it is anyway, right? This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. BYU, shattering records. More people are watching BYU. More people watching the Big 12 at the Pop-Tarts Bowl than the NBA championship or the World Series. That is good. The more we do that, the better chance we have of going to the playoff. Here's how that helps Cincinnati, helps Arizona, helps Baylor. Then the Big 12 is just a group of 5 league. At least that's what one Yahoo reporter insinuated, that we shouldn't be in the Power 4 anymore. What are we doing here? What an idiot. Here's why. And then the SEC's bad. It just... bad. They're losing the games. In the middle of the year, it's cool when Tennessee beats Missouri. It's like, oh, wow, they beat a really good Missouri team. And then, oh, wow, it's really cool when Alabama beats Mississippi State. Oh, that's a good Mississippi State team. But it's not. It's not. They keep losing over and over and over in the bowl season. It's time. It's time to have the conversation. It's time to put it to bed. The obituary for the SEC. If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. TJ Pittenger, college football addiction. Let's talk Big 12, breaking records and viewers.
People cannot get enough BYU football.
Yeah, I don't think it's just BYU. I think this is kind of twofold here. It's the fact that everyone wants to complain about the death of college football and the bowl system, and we just saw between Georgia Tech and BYU that not only is that untrue, but that those two schools were put on the national spotlight like we have not seen in years. BYU and Georgia Tech in the Pop-Tarts Bowl brought in 8.7 million views. That beat Penn State. It beat Clemson. It beat Michigan. It beat Texas. It doesn't matter what other brands were out there. What we just saw is something that is almost unprecedented in sports, as more people are watching BYU football than the NBA championship on ESPN. More people are watching BYU against Colorado last year. 8 million viewers in the Alamo Bowl that are watching World Series games, playoff games in major national sports. TJ, what I'm seeing right now is the birth of the Big 12 establishing itself as a league that America cannot look away from. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's the stupidest thing ever. What do you mean can't look away from? Oh, the number's right there. It sounds really wild when it hits your ears of like, oh, the Big 12 is the league people watch. And then the numbers come out and you realize, oh, shoot, brands like Utah, brands like Texas Tech, brands like BYU are propelling the Big 12 into the spotlight. And the most important piece of this conversation is this. And if you've listened to my show, TJ's show, if you listen to anybody smart about college football, you know viewership is the #1 thing that matters because it equates to brand. When you talk about whether or not this team gets into the college football playoff, you talk about their brand, Notre Dame or Alabama and Miami. What kind of brand do they have? BYU in the past has not had that brand. They just had the most viewership, I should say, for the second year in a row in the bowl games. People are following BYU. People are watching Texas Tech. People are rooting for Utah across the country. These numbers are no fluke. This is proof that the Big 12 can continue to build exposure, get more teams into the college football playoff. When we consider the playoff as an invitational for the best brands in college football, and as we begin to change the way the playoff is formatted and allow less group of 5 talent in there, you need teams that bring in viewership. BYU's doing that. The Big 12 is doing that. Texas Tech is doing that. Utah, Houston over LSU. 3 million people saw for the first time. Houston's actually really good at football, and it gives them staying power into next year. What you need in 2025 and now 2026 to succeed and stay alive in college football are eyeballs on your games on TV. That's where the money comes in. That's what BYU and the Big 12 just did. This conference, the casual viewer can say, oh, nobody watches the Big 12. They're wrong. They're dead wrong.
Well, what's so encouraging, too, is that not only do they watch and see the Big 12 right, in these bowl games, which, the Pop-Tart Bowl does a great job of marketing. Let's be very fair. Like they are a big help to some of this. But then they actually tune in and exactly what you just saw. I don't think very many people cared outside of maybe fans of that team, rivals of that team, or casual Big 12 fans. I don't think many people thought like, oh, Houston will be a fun team to watch. But when they tuned in and they saw what Houston did, when they tuned in and saw what BYU did in that game and the excitement that came with watching them play, this is not your grandpa's BYU, right? Like this is a team that you are really excited to go out and watch. And I think it was such an opportunity that they had playing against some of the brands that they did in some of the games they did. Listen, they played against LSU. Let's be fair for why people tuned in for Houston LSU. There's a lot of SEC brand bias that comes along with that. But because they capitalized on it, they did a great job of probably converting even more people next year that are going to watch it. Because guess what? The Big 12 is an exciting brand of football. And people may hate on it. You may have Wolken, we'll talk about him in a little bit, dogging it. When you tune into the Big 12 and watch Utah and Texas Tech and some of these teams play, it's actually good football. And so people that care about logos and brands, maybe they'll never be convinced. People that actually just like watching good football will be.
We live in a world, I fall into this trap too, TJ, where we think Twitter is gospel, where we think Facebook is gospel, where we go on Instagram and Old Row posted that the Big 12 sucks or some random stat from the Big 12. And we believe that's how every American thinks, but it's not. Just because this tweet got 1,000 likes that says Texas Tech sucks doesn't mean Texas Tech actually sucks. It doesn't mean we watched Alabama get blown out by far more against Indiana than Texas Tech did against Oregon. So what I see out of this is a string of people who have congregated on social media to come against the Big 12 that don't actually represent the college football viewer. The average college football viewer is probably 57 years old, and on Thanksgiving, they're looking forward to watching Mississippi State and Ole Miss because it's a fun rivalry game. They don't give a crap about either team. They just love watching college football. That's who you want to cater to. We're not trying to cater to the Twitter brand. Like, how many more of these 30-year-olds can we get who love IPAs and think the SEC is so good? How many of them can we get to stop watching Ole Miss and start watching Cincinnati? It's not going to happen. What you're trying to do is convince the TV networks, the TV executives, not Daryl on Twitter, but instead the guys at Disney, Mickey Mouse, that BYU, the Big 12, Utah, Baylor, TCU, UCF, West Virginia deserve to be watched. And what these schools are now proving to the money, to the people that matter, that's not money. The guy on Twitter is not money. The meme account on Facebook is not money. It's not equating to viewership. The thousands of likes it gets, if it gets 10,000 likes on a BYU hate tweet, it doesn't mean 10,000 fewer people are watching you on TV. And guess what, TJ? If 10,000 fewer people are watching you on TV, there's still 8.7 million to make up for them. Like we live in a world where we think that one sentence on that one app is gospel, and that's how America feels about college football. And it's just not. It's just not. What matters now is what is in the eyes and what comes down from these TV executives. And they're going to see these numbers and see that BYU, the Big 12, is on a platform that is growing and is growing exponentially. And that is great for a conference that takes a lot of flack day in and day out from idiots that have a phone.
Can I also be honest? The biggest haters, those 10,000 that liked that tweet, they're watching. It's the apathetic. Yeah. It's the apathetic that aren't tuning in. The haters are watching. Like Dan, I know I'm jumping ahead here. Yeah. Dan Walken only wrote that article because he was bored as heck while he was watching an SEC team get blown out. Like I think that your haters are tuning in anyway. But all that said, back to this, it's only compounded. And I know we already talked about this, so we don't have to go super deep on it, but can you imagine what the ratings for BYU and Notre Dame are going to do? Like if the Pop-Tart Bowl, when we're all doing Christmas stuff and holiday shopping and the kids are home and everything else is going on, if that's what it looked like for the Pop-Tart Bowl, can you imagine what things are going to look like when Notre Dame comes to town against BYU?
Gosh, that is going to be... And I'll give Notre Dame some credit. People watch Notre Dame. That people definitely watch Notre Dame. And so if they had been
in the demographic you just said, they fit that 57-year-old because that's when they were elite and the only team on TV.
Because they still think Rudy is a real story. They're convinced that Rudy was real.
Now you just pissed them off.
Rudy's fake. Sorry to burst your bubble here about Rudy. The fact is, people watch Notre Dame, and I'm not going to claim that they don't, because when they play BYU, the numbers will be great. Two teams that a lot of folks put their eyes on. If Notre Dame played the Pop-Tarts Bowl, it's probably 10 million or more that watch this game against BYU, and they're all hate watching to prove a point about Notre Dame or prove a point about BYU. The loser didn't deserve to be in. That is further proof of what I'm trying to say, though, here, and I think it's what you're hitting on. If we're talking about BYU in the same viewership category as Notre Dame, who has their own TV deal with their own major TV network, that's very good for this conference. And I think the Big 12 is proving that this league is going nowhere. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is exactly where I go to play sports bets all year long in the NBA. Look, the NBA is just, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but it is now with NBA Happy Hour. That's right. Fridays, 6 to 7:30 Eastern to become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, surprises. The timing is perfect right before the games, right before the weekend. So before tip-off. That's right, before tip-off. Check the FanDuel app. See what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, a whole lot of Friday energy. NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. It's FanDuel.
Dan Wolken, who, I'll just say this, not to attack somebody, consistently has the worst takes in college football, advocated for the sport to not exist in 2020 when the COVID pandemic was going on, to just put some reference around this. Not that I'm passionate or fired up about this. Dan Wolken put out an article that the Big 12 was basically Group of Five. Like they shouldn't even be compared with the Big Two conferences.
Yeah, if we're going to pull a page from the Drake Toll Show on Westwood One and give an Idiot of the Day, Dan Wolken gets that today. In my book, he says it's time to consider whether the Big 12 is perpetrating a fraud on college football. Is this collection of schools still worthy of being called a power conference? That's him on the current state of the Big 12 conference per Yahoo. Iowa State beat Iowa. Nick Lee makes a great point here. BYU beat ranked Georgia Tech. Utah murdered UCLA, who beat Penn State, who beat the transitive property. Utah murdered, doubled up Nebraska. Matt Rule, the Big Red. Houston beat the SEC's LSU. TCU beat a ranked USC team who decided, credit to them, to play their players in the bowl game. UCF beat the seven time Super Bowl champion Bill Belichick. Scott Frost could not make a bowl game in the Big 12 this year, but he could beat Bill Belichick in a football game. BYU over Stanford. TCU over Bill Belichick against Sonny Dykes, beating Bill Belichick in a football game. TCU over SMU. Baylor over SMU. West Virginia beating a Pitt team that was at the top of the ACC, that beat Georgia Tech, that made a lot of noise. Just because one team that is named Texas Tech lost to Oregon and lost badly, 23-0. I know it wasn't pretty. Just because that happened. And just because recently the Big 12 has not won a ton of college football playoff games doesn't mean this league is worse than the ACC. That I know for sure. It doesn't mean this league is leagues behind the SEC. We just watched multiple Big 12 schools beat SEC teams. And we saw Alabama lose worse than Texas Tech. If you're going to consider any league, TJ, to be Group of Five, it is the ACC sans Miami. And I know you're a Florida State guy, and there are plenty of people who are Clemson folks. Those are two brands that have not won consistently now in a little bit. Where, Clemson went to the college football playoff last year, but their past three seasons have been tumultuous. Their ACC championship victory was against SMU. In a 2-year span, TJ, we've seen SMU, Virginia, and Duke in the ACC championship game. Those fan bases didn't really know their teams had football until 2024. They're just now learning there's a football team on campus or around them. Miami has changed that narrative a bit, and now they're winning in the college football playoff, no doubt. I won't dilute that at all. But the depth of these two leagues, Team 16, now 17 for the ACC, even with Stanford in there, with Boston College especially in there, that's a lot different. UNC this year, a lot different than what the Big 12 is giving you top to bottom, with a West Virginia team who finished near the 16th spot in the Big 12, but beat Pitt this year, one of the best teams in the ACC. If there's any league we're putting big question marks on, it's not the Big 12. It's certainly the Atlantic Coast Conference.
When I think about it, I mean, listen, I'm in my favorite team is in the ACC, and I don't like Miami, but you're exactly right. Like, it is Miami and everyone else. Like, that's just what it is, and yeah, I hope that's not the case. I hope next January when we're doing this, that's not the case. And I hope Florida State's gotten back to where they should be. For several reasons, I'm not a huge Clemson fan, but I hope Clemson's kind of back where they need to be because, yeah, the ACC is largely a joke. I mean, they've, fortunately, not to pull the meme out, they are 6-7 against, or 7-6. The SEC is 6-7. So try and say it right once. Against the SEC. So they've had a good record against the SEC. And I think there is more competitive balance. What's interesting is I think there's more competitive balance in a lot of places. And the ACC certainly does not. And then the Big 12 by measure as well, just because they haven't performed as well in the college football playoff. I think they just don't get that benefit of the doubt. Although I'll tell you this, had Texas Tech gone and beaten an SEC team on the road in Texas A&M and then upset Oregon and maybe Miami was the one to lose in kind of embarrassing fashion against Ohio State, would Wolken have just written the article about the ACC?
No doubt.
Like, why are we putting so much stock into one game? Like, to me, that's what's frustrating is, yeah, Alabama got crushed. Like, why are we not going down the SEC narrative there? Or, yeah, Miami won, but they couldn't even make their conference title game. The ACC had a 5-loss winner in Duke, not in hoops, in football for their conference. Why is and listen, I'm not trying to openly dog on the ACC. I've done that plenty. But why does this narrative exist? Because Texas Tech had a bad day. Listen, you put those two teams back out there, I probably would pick Oregon in a rematch. I would certainly take Texas Tech plus 20. I don't think they're getting blown out like that again. And so, yeah, they had a bad day and made it look worse than it was. If that would have been a 17-10 game, does he write that article? And it wasn't a 17-10 game. Nothing against away from Oregon. I'm not trying to hypothetically get ourselves back. But the results of one game being what they are. I mean, Alabama lost to Florida State this year.
Yeah.
And then lost by 35 to Indiana. Like, not in basketball again. This isn't, don't get caught watching the paint dry. This isn't Hoosier. Like, we're talking about football. And so to base your whole thesis on one game where a team played poorly, that was an aberration from the rest of the way that both those teams have played all year. It's silly to me.
Duke basketball went 35-4. Duke basketball did lose fewer games in 39 contests than the Duke football team did in the regular season alone. That's the ACC. And I'm sorry that me, crapping all over the ACC is actually a product of Dan Wolken saying some really stupid stuff about the Big 12. The ACC just kind of got caught in the crossfire here. But this is another message I want to give. This is another example of the message I like to give listeners of this show. And folks who tune in to you or me or a lot of these, like a John Kurtz, right? Folks who tune into these people. We don't make millions of dollars. I don't know, but I don't think you do. Maybe you do. I'm sorry if I'm cutting you, if I'm diluting you here, but I don't think we're making millions of dollars. A lot of these guys are, and they're getting paid millions of dollars to come on your TV screen and on your radio to further build a narrative that points you toward 10 teams, 15 teams, so that those 10 or 15 can eat. And the more popular those 10 or 15 get, and the more these talking heads begin to prop them up, the more viewers, the more money in their pocket. This is inside trading is what it is in college sports and amongst the media now. When you turn ESPN on and they're spewing how the SEC is not dead yet, they're still good, bad matchups, excuse. It is on us, the dudes with microphones on the YouTube a lot of times, to be completely transparent and honest about what is still right in college football, what is still just in college football. And for these people who get paid millions to question whether or not the Big 12 or even the ACC are power conferences still, and I know I throw it around there. TJ, we throw it around there every now and then as a joke, like, oh, well, the ACC might as well be Group of 5 now because Duke won the championship. No, you still have Clemson and Florida State and Miami. You still have teams that were gritty at the top of the league like Georgia Tech, and the Big 12 has that too. It's the people that are paid the most that are paid to, in essence, create the elite of college football and only prop them up. And outside of that, they don't really care. We care. This is, if you want to see college football thrive, you should care too, because there are really dangerous pieces of rhetoric that are being thrown around nationally, and a lot of those talking heads are getting paid to do so.
Yeah, it is frustrating because so much of what we love about sports is the regionality. And we've talked about how with realignment that's changed a little bit. But what I don't think has changed is some of that regionality that we love. And the Big 12 is a vital piece of the college football landscape. And some may argue it's not as vital as the SEC or the Big 10. And that's fine. I don't, whatever. Have your debates on what you think is more important. Most of that comes down to preference. But when you do have active talking heads like Woken and others that work for ESPN and other outlets, continuously diminishing things that we love about the sport, it is frustrating because, listen, we all thought we were getting a Georgia-Ohio State matchup in this college football playoff. And you know what I think we're getting? A better game. And so, I don't like Miami. I would have liked to seen Georgia and Ohio State because I get caught up in the brand bias too. But people that actually love football should be pretty happy with what we're getting right now. And maybe take that a step further. You might have been pretty happy to see Texas Tech against Indiana. Now I know we're not getting that. And after a 23-point loss, you may not be thinking that way. But just enjoy the football for what it is and don't try and shift all of the narratives to prop yourselves up and make more money. That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day.
Football's not dead as long as you stop saying football is dead. That's it. That's it. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is exactly where I go to find tickets. Dog. I love, on New Year's Eve, every year tradition now, going to watch the Avett Brothers. It's a band out of North Carolina. It's kind of niche, but I go watch the Avett Brothers in North Carolina, and I need cheap tickets. I want cheap tickets. Game Time has them for me. It's not just sporting events. It's concerts, too. I see college football tickets as low as $25. I see concerts as low as $25. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets, concert tickets, comedy tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, code LOCKEDON College for $20 off. Download the Game Time app and do it today. It's Game Time. Download that app. Trust me, you won't regret it.
Drake, the SEC has struggled, and we talked about this in our last video, but they suck in bowl season. They suck in the playoff. They're 6-7 right now against the ACC, which we would all agree is the worst Power 4 conference. Miami gets a little bit of a exclusion from that. But the SEC is struggling today.
Bad. I turn on ESPN on Monday after the college football playoff and after bowl season where the SEC crumbled. It was just a terrible couple of weeks for the Southeastern Conference. And yet there they are with Paul Feinbaum, now Josh Pate for some reason. I don't know what, like Josh Pate used to be, I would turn him on, I'm like, wow, he loves the little man. I've had Pate on my show and I think he's a great guy. But he's drinking the SEC Kool-Aid. There are these talking heads at ESPN that have been very clear that the SEC is not going anywhere. Well, the Southeastern Conference since 2023, they're 2-6 in the college football playoff when not playing themselves. Half their wins are when they're playing their own teams. And another piece of that, those only 2 wins are Texas over Clemson and Arizona State. Mind you, that was Texas' first year in the SEC. 90% of their roster came from the Big 12. Their entire coaching staff came from the Big 12. And they walked into the SEC and dominated year one. Won the conference in the regular season as well. They had only done that one time in the 12 years prior in the Big 12 conference. That was a decade-long mid-tier team in the Big 12 that walked into the SEC and went to the conference championship in year one. And then with America watching in the Tournament of Roses, the Great Rose Bowl, 38-3, which equates to 65-5, which reminds you a little bit of that TCU, yes, TCU and Georgia. That was SEC versus Big 12, no doubt. But since that day, things have been nothing but, it's like TCU broke Georgia. They broke the SEC somehow. And the committee, they got to the end of the season and said, well, the SEC is such a gauntlet. Oh, it's so much better than the Big Ten. Oh, my gosh. The SEC teams deserve to be with their NFL talent in the college football playoff with 5, 6, 7, 8 teams. How many can we get in there? And nearly half the field came from the SEC this year. And it's just not indicative of what that conference is right now. It's not indicative of where the league sits. They have the talent for sure, but they can't figure it out, the amount of coaching changes, coaches fired in the middle of the year, the lack of stability, the fact that now there are players, really good players, who are choosing to leave the SEC to go to the Big Ten specifically. Some that are going to the Big 12, like a Texas Tech is poaching players from the SEC. Guys who go to LSU and they're like, wow, I can't deal with the politics here. I'm going to bounce. I'll go to Kansas State. I'll go to TCU. I'll go to Baylor, Texas Tech, BYU, and I'll go prove I'm a very good football player. That is just a cesspool. It's what a lot of these SEC programs are dealing with right now. Overall, it's good for college football. It's the Disney of college, for the monopoly of college football, is starting to have holes, extreme holes poked in itself. And they've gone 2 years without a team in the national championship game, and they may do that yet again this year. That is a glaring sign that the SEC is not king anymore. And I won't make the case as the Locked On Big 12 guy that our conference is, that this conference is. The Big 10 is just, they're head and shoulders above everybody else, the Southeast Conference included. The SEC is closer to the Big 12 right now when it comes to college football playoff wins the last 3 years than it is the Big 10. That's a wild stat. That's a wild fact, but it's exactly where we sit.
Yeah, and here's what you're spot on, and what I think people in the national media, fans of, SEC teams, just, there's a whole litany of people that would think like this. The SEC, I would argue, is still the most talented league. No matter what credence you give to recruiting rankings, they are the most talented league there. And then whatever credence you would give to NFL draft picks, they're certainly the most talented once they get out of school too. They get the most 4 and 5 stars, and they get the most guys in the league. I don't think they just magically, talent just disappears for 3 to 4 years while they're on college rosters. So talent-wise, yes. And I think that's why they get so much of a benefit of the doubt, Drake. Talented teams don't always win. Like, the more talented team doesn't always win. Alabama is going to have more draft picks than Indiana by quite a large margin. Alabama is going to have quite a few more draft picks than Florida State. And yet those two teams lost, like that transitive property, like they lost, right? Ohio State's more talented than Miami. Let's keep it in the SEC. Ole Miss is not as talented as Georgia. Yeah. And sometimes talent doesn't win out. And so when you think about that, when you look at that, I think there's this mental blocker that immediately gives the SEC the benefit of the doubt and says, oh, well, that was a talented team they beat. Yeah, but it might not have been a good team. Like Tennessee finished with 8 wins this year. Do you know what they also finished with? 0 wins against teams that finished 500 or above. Eli Drinkowitz has gone on runs at Missouri where that continues. Missouri continues to be a really good win for teams over and over and over again. You know what Eli Drinkowitz has never done? Beaten an SEC team that finished with a winning record. And so LSU was a good win for people earlier in the year before they completely cratered and imploded on themselves. That wasn't a very good win for anyone this year. Right? Beating LSU was not an impressive thing that happened. Now, were they ranked at the time? Were they top 10? Had they beaten Florida? Had they beaten Clemson? Yes, all those things are true. But we have this mental blocker that says, oh, they're talented, and so those are good wins. I do think that the SEC is very talented. That doesn't make them all great teams. The coaching turnover is insane. Florida was a talented team. That's how they beat Texas this year. But that didn't make them a good team. And that's what I think people have to get over. I do think that narrative is changing. And as much as I've dogged Kirk Herbstreit in the past, it was somewhat refreshing to hear him say, Alabama's mystique is gone. Their benefit of the doubt is gone. Now, when the committee meets next December, is their mystique going to be gone? Is their benefit of the doubt going to be gone? Is that Saban dynasty really dead in their minds? I don't know. That is, but for one of the leading voices on ESPN to come out and say that, I think that was somewhat refreshing. As much as I've crapped on Kirk in the past, a little bit of a hat tip there.
There's a real case to be made for Alabama being the number 15 team in college football this year. Oklahoma being somewhere around 16, 17. But it's not the format's not conducive to that because they only play each other. The SEC only plays itself, and then they play Wofford. That's how they play themselves in Wofford. Aside from, as you would know, that week 1 game against Clemson, that week 1 game against Florida State, and then when they lose that game or they win that game, if they lose, it doesn't matter. If they win, it's what they hang their hat on. But if they lose, it's like, oh, that was game 1. We were still figuring it out. Yeah. This is an Alabama team that lost to Florida State. And so from there, we are giving them not just the benefit of the doubt, we're giving them the baton of, hey, as long as you keep playing each other, as long as you keep playing yourself, it has created an endless strength of schedule loop, an endless ranked games loop, an endless loop into them being in the top 25 to where every game they play feels like a top 25 game, whereas Auburn, top 25 team this year. Missouri, top 25 team. Florida State, sorry, I'm going to throw them in there. We're propping up Alabama by ranking Florida State as what if they're a top 10 team. And there is Tennessee, you mentioned as well. There's a long list of these SEC schools going to be ranked for a few weeks to boost that league because, we beat so-and-so team. Now let's rank that SEC team. They've lost 3 in a row. Now we pull them back out. They win 1, we'll put them back in. And nobody else in the country gets that kind of respect. And we get to bowl season and learn that the SEC, the amount of times they lose especially, just isn't the number one conference in America, and that draft picks don't equate to good football teams. Hold on, TJ. Draft picks don't equate to good football teams. That's the line. That's it. I can retire on that one. I hope everybody heard that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like, talented teams lose a lot. Not always. When there's good coaching and structure, when there's good coaching, yes, there are a lot of talented teams that win a ton, but being talented alone does not win you games. I'm interested to see where this goes with the SEC and just the narrative around it and the way that we view it and the way that things have shaped. I do think some of that benefit of the doubt is leaving. I don't want to pretend like the SEC is just a crap conference and we're talking about the Mountain West here or anything like that. No, they're still really good, and there's some really good teams in it. I do think it's somewhat telling how good SEC teams look when they play each other. Think about that for a minute. Georgia beat down Texas, and we all thought, oh man, Georgia's really playing well again. Then Georgia goes and beats down Alabama, and we think, oh wow, look, Georgia's bringing it. And then they go play Georgia Tech, and that's a 1-score game. Georgia Tech was not a world beater by any means. In fact, their defense was absolutely atrocious this year, especially in the back half of the year when they gave up 4 billion points to NC State.
And Pitt.
Yes, yeah. And then they go play Georgia Tech really, really close. And you're thinking, oh, well, how did the conference get? And then they go play Ole Miss, and they look great again. We'll see how my Ole Miss looks against Miami. But we saw how Texas A&M looked all year, and then Texas A&M played Miami and scored 3 points. We saw how Bama rebounded and had a good year with the wins against Missouri and LSU and Tennessee, some of these teams that propped them up, 4 ranked matchups in a row. And then we go see what Alabama really looked like against an out-of-conference team. It's funny how Alabama looks so much different against Oklahoma than they did in Indiana. Now, not taking anything away from Indiana. I think they're the best team in the country right now, and I think they're going to win the national championship. But I don't know that they should have been 35 points better. So it is interesting to me when the SEC plays in conference versus out of conference, especially late in the year, the difference in the way their teams look. So maybe Ole Miss will beat Miami by 30 and I'll think differently, but probably not. Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
Yeah, at Locked On Big 12, wherever you find your podcast, and on YouTube, and at Drake C. Toll Show on Twitter.